Hey, what's up everybody? This is C.L.S. All-in-One. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to reupholster a kitchen or a dining room chair. As you can see here, this seat cushion is in really poor condition. The vinyl on this is all ripped up, and the foam inside this is broken down as well. So I will be replacing the foam and vinyl for both of these chairs. So let's get started. So here is an up-close look at one of the chairs before making any repairs. And this is after. Now in some situations, it may not make sense to repair your chairs. For instance, if the frame of your chairs is in poor condition or the value of your chairs is extremely low, then it might make more sense to just replace your chairs. The total cost for me to reupholster two dining room chairs ended up costing around $35 in materials, and the total cost for me to just replace these two chairs with something similar but in good condition would be around $200. So for my situation, repairing the chairs makes sense. I was able to pick up most of the materials I needed at my local Hobby Lobby, but there is many other fabric and craft stores out there that carry similar materials for projects such as this. So the two main materials I needed for this job was vinyl and foam, but the foam does not always need to be replaced. It just depends on how much wear and tear there is on the existing foam. And here are some of the other items and tools I used for this job. A heavy-duty staple gun with 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch staples, some foam glue, a drill or screwdriver, a pair of craft scissors, and some needle nose pliers. So I tried to match the color of the vinyl as close as possible, but this new vinyl is slightly darker. When selecting the vinyl you want to use, there may be many options, but for myself, I prefer to use marine grade vinyl, which is more durable and has a longer lifespan than standard vinyl, but it does have a heavier backing, so it's a little harder to manipulate and stretch than standard vinyl. Okay, it's now time to get started. So the first step is removing the seat cushion, which is usually secured with screws on the bottom side. And after removing the seat cushion, it'd be a good time to inspect the frame of the chair and make sure nothing needs tightened up or possibly repaired. Now it's time to start removing the staples from the cambric dust cover on the bottom side of the cushion, which is normally a black fabric as shown here. To remove the staples, I'm using a utility knife, flat blade screwdriver, and a pair of needle nose pliers. And what I like to do first is loosen the staple with the utility knife blade by prying underneath of it just enough to where I can fit a flat blade screwdriver under the staple. Then I pry the staple up a little bit further to a point where I can then grab the staple with a pair of pliers to remove it. And here's a look at the cambric dust cover after being removed, and I will be able to reuse this at a later point. Now if your dust cover is in really poor condition, this can be replaced, and you can find this material at your local hobby store for a pretty low price. Now it's time to start removing the vinyl, and since I will be replacing this vinyl, I don't need to be near as careful. So I'm just going to start prying the vinyl away from the wood backing with a flat blade screwdriver as shown here. So as you can see here, this does not really remove any of the staples, but it does get the vinyl off rather fast. And if you're looking to take a huge shortcut, you could just leave the staples and the wood backing and just reupholster over the staples. But I will be removing the staples here in just a few. Now let's take a look at the foam, and as you can see here, it's in really poor condition, and it's also multiple layers, which is not necessary. This foam was really easy to remove, but sometimes it may be glued in place or stapled in place, which will require a little extra work to remove. Located in the corners is a couple extra pieces of foam, which provides extra support for the front edge. But since I'm using a slightly thicker foam for the replacement, this extra support will not be necessary. Now I will go ahead and remove the rest of the staples from the wood backing using the same routine with a utility knife, screwdriver, and pliers. And it would probably be a good idea to wear a pair of safety glasses just in case that metal blade breaks off and comes flying towards your face. So I decided to go with a slightly thicker 2-inch foam to make the chairs a little more comfortable. The original foam was around 1.5 inches thick. And now I'm on to the next step. So right here, I'm placing the wood backing on top of the foam. Then I will trace an outline with a marker onto the foam, but when I make my outline, my goal is to make it 1/2 inch wider on all sides so the cushion is slightly larger than the backing. And now this is ready to cut. So there is specialty tools such as serrated knives designed just to cut foam, but you can also use just a regular pair of craft scissors, as I will demonstrate here. The scissors will need to be sharp and rather large in order to cut through foam such as this, and it may take a little practice to get the hang of it. So right here, I'm just following the marker outline and trying to keep the cuts nice and straight. Then, after cutting all the way around, I like to cut about 1/2 of an inch from the top edge of the foam cushion at approximately a 45-degree angle to somewhat round the corners. But you'll want to keep in mind, rounding the corners like this only works with thicker foam such as this. A thinner foam may not have enough material to be cutting away. Now this next step is optional, but I like to secure the foam to the wood backing with a little bit of foam glue. This will help keep the foam in position when stretching the vinyl around it. So this particular glue sets up pretty fast and grabs instantly. When placing the foam on the backing, I just center it so I have 1/2 of an inch of the foam showing on all sides. And I also make sure the corners I rounded are facing away from the backing as shown here. Now it's time for the vinyl. When cutting the vinyl, you want to make sure the piece is big enough to wrap around the cushion and onto the back side of the backing by at least 3 inches or more on all 4 sides. If the piece of vinyl ends up being cut too small, you may have a hard time stretching it into position, and you might have to start over and cut another piece. To secure the vinyl to this particle board backing, I'll be using 1/4 of an inch staples, but in some areas such as the corners where the vinyl may overlap itself, 3/8 of an inch staples may be needed. So I will start off with the back edge of the cushion that lines up with the back of the chair and pull around 3 inches of vinyl onto the back side of the backing, then secure it in the center with around 6 staples, side by side. Then I will do the same thing on the opposite side, except this time I will pull and stretch the vinyl with a fairly decent amount of tension. This part can be somewhat challenging, but it's important that it's stretched tight, otherwise you may end up with wrinkles in the vinyl if it's too loose. Now I will finish the side I started on using just a small amount of tension to pull the vinyl. Then I will secure it with staples at every 1 inch or less going across, side by side, but stopping at approximately 2 inches from each corner because the corners will have to be stretched last. And right here I did make a mistake. I do have one staple that's a little bit too close to the corner, but that's okay. I can just pull this out at a later point. Now I will head back to the second side again and use a large amount of tension to pull the vinyl nice and tight. Then I will secure it with staples going across, but again staying 2 inches away from the corners. Now something I would like to mention about the staples. As you can see here, some of these look a little sloppy, but it doesn't really matter because these are all going to be covered up with the cambric dust cover, so all these staples will be hidden. Now it's time to move on to the third side, and I will be using a large amount of tension to pull the vinyl tight, then staple it in place, but stop 2 inches away from the corners. Next, I will move on to the fourth side or the last side, and again use a large amount of tension to pull the vinyl tight, then staple it in place going across and stopping 2 inches from the corners. And here's a look at the cushion after stretching all 4 sides, and it's starting to look okay, but now it's time to stretch the corners. Now this is probably one of the hardest steps, so it may take a while to get the hang of, but what you want to do is grab all the loose vinyl in the corner and start pulling it really tight until all the wrinkles or folds of the vinyl are pulled just past the corner. Then staple it in place. And at this point, you may need to use the longer 3/8 of an inch staples to ensure the vinyl stays secured in place due to the vinyl folding, which makes it thicker. And here is a look at the first corner after stretching, and you can see there is no wrinkles or folds visible on the top side of the cushion. Now let's move on to the next corner and repeat the same steps. Grab the loose vinyl, then pull it nice and tight until all the wrinkles and folds are past the corner, then secure it in place with staples. Now I'm on to the third corner, and again, repeating the same steps. And here is the last corner. Now I do have one staple that is a little bit too close to the corner, so I will go ahead and pull this staple first before stretching this corner. When stretching the corners, as shown here, you can see that I have a decent amount of vinyl that I can grab onto and hold, which makes this process a lot easier. If the vinyl was cut any shorter to begin with, this step would be much more challenging because I would not have as much material to grab onto to get a decent grip. So all four corners are now stretched, and it's time to cut off the excess vinyl. Now it's time to secure the cambric dust cover, just like it was to begin with staples at about every 1 inch. Now if your cambric material is in really poor condition, it'd be a good idea to go ahead and replace it. And all you have to do is cut the material slightly larger than the size of the cushion, then fold the edges to where it's slightly smaller than the cushion, then staple it in place. And here's a look at the finished cushion. So you can see here that there's no folds or wrinkles visible on the top side of this cushion, and all the edges and corners look nice and rounded. So one last step left. I just need to secure this cushion to the frame of the chair with the 4 screws I removed earlier. And if for some reason you end up with some screw holes that are stripped out, you can just use a slightly thicker screw that is the same length to fix this issue, and these larger screws can be found at your local hardware stores. Now it's time to test this cushion out, and that feels pretty comfy, especially with the thicker foam. So here's a before and after comparison, and you can see there is a drastic difference. Now I just need to touch up the stain to get this chair looking new again. Okay, it's now time for me to go, but I'm going to leave you with a time lapse of reupholstering the second chair. If you liked this video, if you could, hit that like button and please subscribe. And have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time.